Metaverse.
Greetings, I'm Shad, and I have looked at some variant designs of lightsabers in the past, but there are many more to go. Of course, I'm gonna rehash some of the lightsabers I've already touched on, but because I've done dedicated videos, I won't need to go into too much detail. Now, in regards to the singular lightsaber, it is about as basic a design as you can get in terms of a sword-like weapon. Handle plus blade, laser, plasma thing. I do have multiple videos where I discuss the reality of having a, blade of plasma would actually do to a human. It would make them explode due to explosive expansion, converting your liquid blood into gas instantly because it's so insanely hot. And this is confirmed that they're insanely hot when Qui-Gon literally tries to melt through a blast door. In this analysis, I'm going to be looking at the utility of lightsabers based on how they function in the way that they're depicted. So they cut and they cauterize, and even though they don't they don't actually cut, they should melt like a line this thick through someone. Anyway, let's just pretend. Okay, they cut. And in that regard, they're laser swords. First lightsaber, as I mentioned, that's kind of our basis, our baseline level. And in all honesty, it works, but it's not my favorite design. There are a couple of things lacking in it. And my criticism with this carries through to many other lightsabers that only have a slight variant on the first one. So if we look at, say, Count Dooku's lightsaber design, it's curved. Give you a bit of a better grip, granted, but that's kind of it.
He wields it in a weird way though. He wields it down like that, so like it's like curved off of his grip. Is it? Like he wields it.
Oh, so it's curved and it's kind of forward a bit, like like a gun. That's interesting. That wouldn't be a terrible grip for a sword. In fencing, there is a type of grip on certain foils, and I forget some because look, I study historical. Sword fighting, not modern day fencing, and so I'm not up to date on all the terms between a foil and a saber, and I know there's like a saber in fencing is different to the foil in fencing, different but there is almost like a pistol grip handle in some of sabers that they use in modern day fencing. It obviously works, okay? So you can, so design, where it points the blade a bit forward. That has some utility to it. In actual fact, there are blades that have a forward curve, and that gives you more leverage in the cut. What's interesting is the drawback to having a forward curving blade is that it can knock you out of edge alignment when you cut, but that's not really a problem with lightsabers because they don't have an edge. And so a forward curving design might actually have more benefits than detriments.
So they can't really bend, can they?
The blade doesn't bend, but the fact that it's curving forward from your grip, when you hit down, there is a possibility of messing up the edge alignment. That's why even having a blade that curves back, that can have a benefit in assisting or encouraging draw cuts, but you don't need that because lightsabers cut brilliantly well. Now, when it comes to getting in the bind, you might get a little bit more leverage with a forward-pointed lightsaber from your grip, and that can also assist. So if you got the handle and it's forward-pointing, that can assist when you lean forward to try and curve around someone, the opponent's lightsaber, to strike them. Really, this one would come down to personal preference, where you prefer a straight lightsaber or a forward curving one. And Dooku isn't the only one that has a forward curving one. Is it Ventress or? A Ventress lady. She has forward curving ones. It balances, in my opinion. Let's go on to Darth Maul's one. This is one of the next most iconic styles of lightsaber, the double-bladed lightsaber. Well, I have a dedicated video on this one, in which I basically find there's far more use and utility to that than you might think. And the fact that a lightsaber beams can disappear when it's turned off makes it much more easier to carry. You have the option of doing one beam or two, which gives you a larger handle with more leverage. In terms of the historical comparison, there are types of swords in history that had an exceptionally large handle in proportion to its blade. The Nagamaki from Japan is an interesting example, exceptionally large handle. In terms of Europe, we see less examples. You could maybe say a type of sword staff that had a much shorter shaft could qualify. So there are definitely historical precedents for that type of weapon. And with the double-bladed lightsaber, you have the option of a large-handled single-bladed or a double-bladed weapon, and then you get all the interesting advantages that I talk about in the dedicated video. So I actually really like the double-bladed lightsaber. In terms of all the different lightsaber variants, it's probably one of my favorite. I think it's really cool.
And when it gets cut in half, it still works.
It still works!
One side does.
Well, look, I wonder if it's because it cut far enough down that it would have only damaged that end of one.
But they're separate mechanisms, you can tell.
There are separate mechanisms, yes. Because we're on the double-bladed one, I want to talk about some of the variants, except the the Inquisitor one, because I do want to say that to last. But one of the most bafflingly dumb variants I've seen on it is the evil Rey's lightsaber that we see in her vision on, is it Ryzer Skywalker that we see that one? Yeah, Ryzer Skywalker. I've got a dedicated video on how incredibly dumb that design is. But basically it's two lightsabers that are side by side, that can be used side by side, or flick out into a double-bladed lightsaber. And you would just have the double-bladed lightsaber literally gives you everything that the double, because the utility of having two side by side is bafflingly dumb. Again, look at the video as to the reasons why. Okay, before we go into one of the final variants of the double-bladed lightsaber, the Inquisitor one, because, yeah, let's talk about some more of the variants of the normal lightsaber. And this first one that comes up, look, even if they might have done it as a bit of a cash grab for to have something different and something unique, to me it's one of the most obvious additions to the standard design lightsaber. It baffles me that no one thought of it or did it before, and it creates a bit of a plot hole, and that's Kylo Ren's crossguard lightsaber. Crossguards are really useful. There's a reason why they were put on historical swords. They're great!
I've always had this bone to pick, but I've never spoken up, so here it is.
Okay, go on, Scott.
Crossguard lightsaber, right?
Yes.
It's clearly got two bits of exposed metal that act as an exhaust.
Okay.
What if that gets cut? Is it lightsaber resistant? And if it is, why not just make your whole get-up out of that stuff?
All right.
How does it work?
Okay, I'm glad you brought it up, because this is actually a controversy that came around when this lightsaber was revealed. And people were saying it's dumb because it was just chopped in half. So, one of the answers is lightsaber material. Why don't people just wear the whole lightsaber resistant material? Sometimes they do. Darth Vader is one. His outfit is lightsaber. He gets a full-on hit on the arm in The Empire Strikes Back from Luke, and it tanks it. He, like, on a regular person, that should chop him in half. He goes, "Rrr," but he survives it and then gets right back into the fighting. So he has lightsaber-resistant armor. Then there's, of course, Beskar, obviously in Mandalorian, which is 100% resistant.
Well, it heats up, so not 100%.
Yeah, and then we see the special red guards in The Last Jedi, whose armor is directly proportional in the use of the plot and what they want in the given fight scene, where it'll block lightsabers if they want them to, and then it'll chop right through it like it's nothing when they want it to. It's such arbitrary nonsense, that armor, but it's there as well, somewhat resistant. Because we see a guy tank one on his forearms, and then other times he just goes straight through. One other thing that I've heard people say is that the energy portion, the actual plasma portion, is going through the actual encasing. And so if you cut through the casing, you would still hit the energy portion inside that case, which it would then block. And it's there, it is really just there to redirect the beam. So it would damage it. And the problem is then, if that's the case, you could screw up the entire thing, because remember, it's a lightsaber like this, right? And it comes down to the side, and then there's that casing. If you had a lightsaber slide down, you could shave off the top of the first casing here, and the side casing you shave off the top there, and if it's there to redirect the flow, you would just have like this spewing out thing. So I'm not fully satisfied with that explanation about there's a beam, a plasma beam inside that casing. And I think if they designed some type of shielding energy flow that redirected the beam into the crossguard, that could answer it. So the issue I have with the crossguard is that it raises a plot hole, is that why didn't anyone make it before? They should have had some explanation to describe that this is an advancement in technology. Maybe there was a new power source. Star Wars technology had a cool kind of explanation that the explanation was it reached a plateau. This is why not more advances were coming about, but that's also why when you go back in time, most of the technology is pretty much the same, especially between the prequels and the primary trilogy. But of course, when you go back really, really far in the Star Wars expanded universe, which is now uncanon, you have technological differences like the Proto Lightsaber, which needs a power pack. And look, if it functions like a normal lightsaber, the Proto pack yeah, it's interesting. I think the cord would get in the way a little bit, but not as much as the issue. It's a vulnerability for being cut, and then your lightsaber goes. But yeah, I think the Proto Lightsaber, you know, is an interesting concept. So again, now going back to the crossguard thing, they needed to explain how it came about because it's so useful. So darn useful. In actual fact, just while we're on the subject of really useful things in the lightsaber discussion, handheld shields would be incredibly useful and powerful for anyone using a lightsaber, Jedi or not. But the explanation is, you can't have handheld shields. But then the prequels were made and we see Gungans, a not particularly bright race, who have they have handheld shields.
No,
it was just Jar Jar, okay? But Jar Jar does not represent the Gungan race well. And he gave the power to the Emperor! He was the only one dumb enough to let the Empire rise.
Yeah, us humans on Earth would never do something so stupid.
True.
Without politics.
There is far less risk in having the crossguard strike your own hand than you might think. Thrand from the channel Thane Thrand did a test on that where he got like a prop and painted the things and did heaps of moves. The crossguard never struck him. When you get used to the position of the crossguard, you become you adapt to it, and you have almost subconscious awareness of where it is based on the sword position. And so, no, having the crossguard hit you isn't a problem. And then you have all the advantages of being able to do greater bind positions, leverage. Crossguards are awesome. Gee, what do I like better, the Kylo Ren crossguard lightsaber or the double-bladed lightsaber? Ooh, it's tough. I like them both. I like them both more than the regular lightsaber. We see an interesting lightsaber in Rebels, where it's like got a mechanical kind of knuckle bow on it. I'm not sure if that's just... Look, I haven't seen Rebels.
It's a blaster.
Is it? Oh, it's a blaster.
Blaster out the top of it.
Ah, that's the blaster one. Was this a technological development? But it's during the time in between the prequels and sequel. No, it's during the time between the prequels and primary series. And so, can he use both at the same time?
From everything I found, it's a no.
It's a no. Okay. Then maybe, like, because I would say, like, if you could actually make something that could shoot at the same time as having the beam, that's great. Yeah, exactly. All the bind where they're just dead, game over. It would actually be phenomenal. In terms of gun swords, they existed. I have a dedicated video talking about gun swords. They're real. Sometimes, more often, the gun is in line with the blade, but other times it's there. They didn't catch on because the sword was already getting phased out because guns were becoming so popular. And even in situations in which you might find it useful, unfortunately, historically, the gun sword gave you either a gun that wasn't as great as a dedicated made gun or a sword that wasn't as great as a dedicated main sword, and with higher chances of damage to the gun because the impact is much greater.
That's what happens when you try to please everyone.
But if you could get one that worked just as well as each other, combined, then I think, yeah, absolutely, there's some huge utility in that.
Don't they use that in a movie where, like, there's a character who's like a villain who likes to duel, but when he points his sword like to duel, he pulls the trigger and it shoots? I've seen that in a movie or a TV show somewhere.
Well, you might have seen it in my novel.
No, it's not that one.
Blackheart has... they're not really guns, but they're gun equivalents. They're called shot spikes. He has house shot spikes on his sword that he uses in dueling.
Oh, that's the pirate he kills.
Yeah.
That was a cool scene, that whole...
Check out my book if you're interested. Why don't most people in the setting do that? Shot spikes are actually highly regulated in the setting and illegal for most civilians, but civilians are...
Only pirates have it!
Because they're willing to break the law, you see? But the civilians who must obey the law, they are encouraged to wear swords because of monsters that might come about and they have to be prepared, because shot spikes are basically useless against these monsters, so there's no point in having civilians ready. But swords, there's a reason why there's a sword culture in the book, and I did think about this, because that's the thing that you need to think about. If you have this obvious but really useful adaptation of a weapon that is possible in the technology of the setting, why aren't people doing it? And this is the problem that I don't think people are thinking about in Star Wars, these creators, where they just want a new toy or something to sell, so they think of things to change it, and they don't think of, why hasn't anyone done this before if you could do it? And if they can justify it, they need to. Is it a new technological development? Is something unique or special about this character's lightsaber that enables it to function as a gun? It's a bit of a novelty that you could achieve the same by just having a gun on your offhand or there ready. So combining the two, It might save a little bit of time, might not. The fact that you need to turn off the beam to shoot the gun, is that just as quick as drawing the gun? And so you could almost justify it in the setting that the Jedi didn't bother with it. This is one of my criticisms of the Jedi. One of the greatest weapons the Jedis could use would be blasters and guns because they could use the Force to assist aiming. Yeah. Like high-powered, long-range sniper rifle Jedis. Holy crap. That would be insane.
That's a good fan fiction right there.
Yeah,
in fact, Obi-Wan does that in an episode. He pretends to be, he goes undercover as like a highly skilled sniper assassin.
Does he?
Yeah, and apparently he's like really good at shooting him, which makes no sense why I couldn't.
In the new Obi-Wan TV, if you're interested, we have been reviewing the Obi-Wan TV series over on Night's Watch. We have thoughts.
It's a great show.
So great. Yeah. We love content. I'm a little on the fence on this because the reasons that Jedis don't use blasters in the Star Wars universe, I'm not exactly happy with. It's like so uncivilized. But it could be really useful. And if it's a matter between life and death and saving innocent lives, and you'd be able to achieve it better by using a gun. Tradition saying don't use gun to be less effective weapons to help save people's lives and achieve the goals of the Jedi is pretty darn stupid.
It's funny because just before he'd said so uncivilized, he'd just used the blaster to save his own
life. But instead it's like, we're still not going to teach other Jedi to do it because they can die.
How spiteful can you be?
I know. I mean, and because he would be screwed if he did have access to a gun. But there are a lot of Jedi who can't force pull a gun to them in a tough situation which they had a gun, they could have lived.
And you know what happened that same day? Order 66, where the blasters won.
Exactly. So I love classic Star Wars. I've been disappointed, but even classic Star Wars has some important criticisms, okay? Just saying. Like I said, I think Jedi should be using blasters more often, so I like this, that it gives a blaster, but in terms of is it really useful, you could just have a blaster as a sidearm and a lightsaber. If you could shoot at the same time the beam is out, then it's OP. That's like, holy crap, this should be standard weapons, and I really like it. It's up there. In actual fact, if you could shoot at the same time with the beam out, it might be the most offensively effective design, more than a crossguard. Like, better yet, give one that has a crossguard and can shoot.
And has a shield.
And is double-sided. Now we're getting a bit ridiculous. Maybe you don't need the double-sided one, but one that can shoot and a crossguard. Hey, I'd say that's good. So, like, what is this one here? That's Ventress's one. That they connect and then she can separate them, right? Because I remember her ones being strongly curved. Darth Maul one, okay, it should have the option to separate into two. Because, what?
One looks like a shovel. Yeah,
it does. It has. I've seen that one. It's just got like a weird kind of thing on it. It's just for look. I don't think it. Like maybe you could cut things with it. What if you need to chop through a bit of wood and you don't want to set it on fire with the lightsaber, so you're just gonna. It's the survivalist lightsaber.
Carpenter make that one for himself? What the hell?
Other variants of normal lightsabers, most of them are just variants of the handle design, like the interesting survival one. But then there is the dark saber. Look, I have a dedicated video on the dark saber, and it's basically an edgy version of a normal lightsaber. There's not real great advantages. It has a weird kind of crossguard. If that crossguard can protect it, not crossguard. It's got like an angled, small variant of a discard. It's like rectangular.
However, the blade is thinner. And
I did mention that in my review. By having a thinner blade, it means it might be able to cut through resistant material quicker. I don't know if that justifies it because you're fighting against a regular person. Is it, it seems like it's a more powerful version of a lightsaber.
It gets heavier as it cuts, apparently.
But I still prefer crossguard. I prefer the gun shooting combo and probably the double-bladed one as well. So it's on the lower end, but there's interesting things to be said about the Darksaber, I admit, and I have a dedicated video on it if you want a deeper dive. Oh, wow. Okay. Tonfa lightsabers. Where do these come up in anything, or are they just like a gimmick? In terms of how, again, I'll need to experiment. Can you get advantage of swinging it around like that? And is that better than just slicing it? Do you have better points of leverage because it's pointing forward like this? It's got an interesting, discussion about the pata, which is the gauntlet sword, which is a sword that comes forward out from the point of forearm, and this kind of gets the same with if you hold the tonfa with the blade forward. I would be worried about, leverage would be a big problem. Like if you try and get in the bind, right, and it's pressing, they could rotate it in your hand much easier than if you're holding it in your fist. That could be a major fatal weak point in that design.
Well, you can hold it from either end. You know, you can hold it from the long
You can. So there's a question where you don't need to hold it in that end. So then what's the point? Don't know. So let me know what you think in the comments below about tonfa lightsabers. Yeah, just thinking about it. We'll see. Okay, whip lightsaber. Having a kind of separate sense of location and being able to control things supernaturally to a crazy degree would not only be helpful for this type of weapon, it's actually essential. No regular person would be able to use a lightsaber whip with full confidence of safety. And you might say, hey, there are master whip users who can perfect aim and everything like that.
Their whips don't cut through everything.
Like, what about when the whip lands on the ground? Are you just going to damage the ground? Like, you could not... Even masters have a chance of losing control. And if you lose control of this weapon, there's a chance of just instant death. No. Like, by itself, without superhuman control, it is a ridiculously dumb weapon. All right, now let's think about Jedis. Maybe, this is still a tough one because there are elements you wouldn't be able to control because you can control it as much as you want, but it's a flexible, flippy around thing that as soon as it hits something or an opponent manipulates it against you, you can't control your opponent. You might be able to preempt them with precognition, but if they're fighting against another Jedi-like person, they could turn that weapon against you pretty severely.
Can it go hard and soft?
I don't think so. Technically, there is not depicted in many Star Wars things dynamic use of lightsabers, like lightsabers changing their form, shape, size dynamically in combat. And so that's why I say most likely the whip would have to remain flexible. The problem is hitting the ground. Like, even if you're a Jedi, just have some respect of other people's property. If you're on the outside, that's fine.
But she's a Sith.
Sith, okay, man, she's just fine, just melting the ground around them, everything, because you can't wrap it up and hold it in your hand. And so the only ways to really avoid hitting a lot of things around you and the ground is turning it off every time you're not whipping it. But then that restricts your use. Okay, you would have a really interesting range of threat with a whip lightsaber. You could keep him at bay quite a lot by whipping it out and everything. Those types of attacks, and this is where I give some credence to the whip in Castlevania. I have great skepticism on the utility of long bull whips in combat generally, and there are some people who try and say it's a useful self-defense weapon. Massive doubt in regards to that. But the way that they're used in Castlevania, it's a blessed whip that only needs to touch a vampire to make him explode. And so it's a longer range weapon that you can instantly pull back and reset. It's like a throwing dagger that you can suddenly get back in your hand and just whip it out and flick it again. And in that utility and context, it's actually far more viable. It would be a very difficult weapon to defend against because it's so flexible. If you tried to block it, the whip has a very high chance of just whipping around and cutting you anyway. That's one of the biggest utilities of it. It would be a very difficult weapon to defend against. And people might say, well, then a regular whip has validity. Not as much as you might think, because
the regular whip can't cut through everything.
If you're hit on any other part of the line of the whip except the very tip, it's not going to hurt very much. It's only the tip that cracks the speed of sound that can have the really high ouch.
Only when done with a specific
movement. And if you get inside that range, you could nullify the effect. But anyway, that's regular whips. A lightsaber whip doesn't have that issue at all. Any part of the whip you get touched with, you're cut in half, which is okay. That is pretty devastating. That means it has a very wide range of offense. Just these you could do wide ones, you could do sharp snap ones.
But I feel like it'd have the same problem if once you get inside of that, if you can, there's no what do you call it, leverage they can actually apply.
The leverage is a big weakness. As soon as but the thing is, the lack of leverage could be an advantage because if you try and block, it just will flex around and hit you. But if you could wrap it up, and I think there's a higher ability to disable the weapon than other weapons, but it kind of balances out by its other unique advantages. It's a tricky one to analyze. It has potential. It has some valid potential, I would say, but only for a Sith that doesn't care about cutting up everything. Like if you could change a regular length lightsaber into a whip and then back, oh boy, that would be a bit crazy, I do admit. That would be nuts, actually. Imagine like you strike down and they block up, and then you just turn it flexible, and it just cuts through. So okay, the whip has. It's a bit of a wild card, honestly. It could be great. It could be. It's hard to say. It's hard to say. All right. So finally, I think we're coming to the Inquisitor lightsaber. So there are two kind of either depictions or modes of the Inquisitor lightsaber. From this picture, this really looks like the circle can be folded in half. When I first saw it, I thought, is there just like a half circle version, a full circle version? But it actually looks like, no, they can fold out into the full circle, and some just wear it in full circle mode, and some just have it in half circle mode. Why does it have the circle? It's so it can spin, because that's a good trick.
Is it lightsaber? Yeah. Is it lightsaber resistant though? That metal on the circle? If it was, it'd be a good cross.
It would need to be. If not, like I don't mind having a lightsaber with like a knuckle bow guard of lightsaber resistant material. That would be cool. Put a blade on it, just an extra utility. I'm not against that. I have interesting thoughts on the spinning utility. One, you would need to hold it on, like, if you hold it front forward on, okay, you have a massive opening in your hand. You're not blocking really anything if they just strike. And it's not just small, it's a big circle like this that is spinning around. And so if you're just trying to offend the edge, I don't really see the point if you can just have a regular lightsaber and cut on the sides like that. And so to protect your hand, you would then need to spin it on a side. It'll be spinning like that. And what I'm about to say here might validate it in some people's mind. It would give an unskilled person ability to offend that plane, if you turn it on the side, spinning like that, without needing to do anything actively themselves. It's just spinning, and it's but it's like a line of cuttiness that goes forward, where with a regular lightsaber, you would need to actually angle it to it. But the thing is, you can offend that plane if you were just talented and had a regular sword and just cut that way and protect against it.
You know that how obviously the thing can spin separate from the actual hand of where the power probably comes from, right? Well, what if you can get to the bind one end and the other end can come up the opposite way?
Maybe.
Because if it can do that, it already has the potential to do that.
If they could spin separate to being, that has an interesting utility. It'll be maybe I could give it more credit if it could do that. But from everything that I've seen, they're always in opposition, one pointing in other end, and they only spin like that.
That still doesn't make sense, because if it can move separate, if it can be on a separate angle to the actual where the power's...
Yeah, I know. It should be able to do that, but I've never seen it depicted being able to do the other way.
That would be deadly, though, in the bind.
It would be interesting. Like, I do admit, there's some interesting... Actually, I would give it, seriously, if you're in the bind like this and you have a blade that can just go whink...
Yeah.
That would be crazy cool.
Yeah, because the bind gets from one angle, but if you can come from the exact opposite angle, that's deadly.
Honestly, that would be really, really cool.
Why not do that?
I don't know. Why? Instead, they just have it spin. And the spinning, it's like a way to offend a certain plane if you're not that skilled. And people, this is the validating thing. The Inquisitors aren't meant to be that good with a lightsaber, even though I think that's being contradicted by Obi-Wan. But the Inquisitors were meant to be really low-level, ineffective, like they could only use the Force little bits, and they were purposely not fully trained as full-on Sith, so Darth Vader and Sidious could just wipe him out when their use was done. Still, doesn't make sense that if they're hunting Jedi, not being fully trained, that wouldn't make him that really tough, but then they go in larger numbers. And, I mean, in Rebels, I believe, we see a single Jedi take out, like, more than one Inquisitor, so Jedis should be trained better than Inquisitors, which again seems to be contradicted in Obi-Wan, the show. And if you hear the noise that's suddenly in the background, that's the rain. I can't do anything about it. Hopefully you can bear with me through it. So the dumbest application that we've seen with the spinning is actually in Rebels, and it's that the Inquisitors can kind of levitate themselves with the spinning. It doesn't make sense. People like, no, it creates a gyroscopic effect. Like, it seems like a very elaborate semi-levitation device when you're in Star Wars and they can just have flight packs or levitation things. Like, why? You don't need it. You don't need it to be so awkward and inefficient when you have more effective options.
The creators said the lightsabers, it isn't a spinning effect that makes them fly. They have repulsor lifts built into the lightsaber.
Oh, yeah, good cope.
And
but why are they spinning it?
They spin!
They can just let it lift without spinning.
Bloody Mary Poppins.
So either way,
That's a cope. That's just like, okay, it is dumb. Let's quickly try and bullcrap a reason to not make us look so silly. Because
the blades don't have any sort of.
yeah, I know they don't have any aerodynamic effect angle. Yeah.
Anyway, stupid. Still stupid.
Yes. And it could have been justified if they did what you said. Yeah, have it rotate. It would be difficult to control, and you'd need like buttons, and it would be really bad if you accidentally press the wrong button and it goes and cuts you the opposite way.
Yeah.
That would be bad. But if you're super trained and you know where those buttons are by heart, you'd hate to misclick. Because this is the thing. I play video games. In terms of really training yourself to get really familiar with what buttons do what, you can still accidentally press the wrong one, even after tremendous amounts of training.
I was playing Rust the other day on the boat out in the middle of the ocean, and I pressed the jump button, got out, my boat kept going.
But these are supposed to be Force users. They're not as good as Jedi or Sith. They're not as well trained. I think there's a high chance that a Inquisitor could accidentally press the control to make it do the wrong thing. But if you just pretend they'll never make that mistake and they control it perfectly, then there's some interesting utility about having the other end move along the circle freely. There's some problems with position, because the ring can get in the way of you moving and angling it, and would actually, literally get in the way. You would need to almost hold it like this to be able to get proper use and not have the ring hit your hands. And that makes the bind a bit, instead of having the bind on the forward, you would need to have the bind on the side, and then you could have the ring rotate and cut up like that. And so I think you could hold it in a way that the ring wouldn't make it too awkward. You could still use it even with the ring there. So look, it's mostly dumb and gimmicky, and it's not utilized at the cool level that it could be done. And yeah, I come to the reason why. Why do Inquisitors specifically need such a... And I think this is just, they needed something cool and different to make them,
It's like the whole Dark Troopers thing. You know?
Yeah, I'd much rather when you have something different that's justified reasonably within the world building. You know the weapon the Inquisitors should need? If they're hunting Jedi,
Blasters.
not just blasters, shotgun blasters.
Just regular.
Yeah, Jedi with his lightsaber. Yeah, block this. Like a spray blaster shot is... checkmate on Jedi. You know, they would have to dodge the only way.
Yeah. In the canon, the Mandalorians fought the Jedi, and they found that even blasters weren't useful against them, so they literally just got regular shotguns because they couldn't block them.
Those are the lightsabers I wanted to discuss. Sometimes there are even other more wacky lightsabers, and we might have missed one or two. Sorry if we did, but I think we covered most kind of iconic ones. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Hang on. Do you see this one? This is one. It's a 4! It's a 4! Anyway, thanks for watching, guys. Let me know what your thoughts are. What do you think about certain different variant lightsaber designs? I'd love to read them. Hope to see you there, of course, and hope to see you on the next video on Shadowversity. So until that time, farewell.